Good evening. The government is shut down. At least 6 cabinet positions are unfilled, including defense secretary. And the president of the United States is telling us all to enjoy the ride. In his second tweet of 2019, the first was to plug a former aide's book. President Trump said, in all caps, Happy New Year to everyone, including the haters and the fake news media. 2019 will be a fantastic year for those not suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. Just calm down and enjoy the ride. Great things are happening for our country. Now, that was at 8 a.m. yesterday. Short time later, also on Twitter, he compared a retired, highly decorated 4-star general to a dog and said he has a big, dumb mouth. Enjoy the ride, everyone. He continued today online with falsehoods about the border wall and on camera with this. A cabinet meeting notable for how few actual confirmed cabinet members were in the room. To his left, the acting defense secretary. To his right, the acting interior secretary. That's in addition to the acting attorney general, the acting chief of staff, and acting EPA administrator. That's a lot of acting. Considering they aren't on a stage or in a movie, they are in real life. Oh, and speaking of movies, did you notice what was on the president's desk? It's a movie-type poster of the president with the words, "Sanctions are coming November 4th." Apparently riffing on the first Game of Thrones episode and, the idea that winter is coming. What's weird, though, given its prominent placement, is that the president said nothing about it during all his riffing. He didn't mention anything about the poster. Sad. The president did have a lot to say, however, on other topics. A good deal of it factually questionable, some of it flat out false, and all of it, as you'll see, a pretty good preview of what enjoy the ride could actually mean in the coming year. So we're going to start our Keeping Him Honest section right now, going through point by point what the president said today, starting with his broadside against his former Secretary of Defense. Now, he might have been inspired by something that we mentioned at the top, a tweet attacking Stanley McChrystal. In the tweet, he said, General, in quotes, McChrystal got fired like a dog by Obama. Last assignment, a total bust, known for big dumb mouth, Hillary lover. Okay, so that was yesterday. Then today, the president attacked his former defense secretary, retired 4-star General James Mattis.
But what's he done for me? How has he done in Afghanistan? Not too good. Not too good. I'm not happy with what he's done in Afghanistan, and I shouldn't be happy. But he was very happy. He was very thankful when I got him $700 billion, and then the following year, $716 billion. So, I wish him well. I hope he does well. But as you know, President Obama fired him, and essentially so did I.
Keeping him honest, if essentially fired means did not fire, what the president said would be true. It doesn't mean that, however. General Mattis resigned in protest of the president's policies and even released a letter detailing their differences. Now, there is a long, proud tradition of that in the military and in U.S. government service, but you don't see it much anymore because people these days want to stay as close to power as long as they possibly can. But Mattis resigned, and his resignation letter is polite but very clear about his opinion of the president's actions. Now, because of that letter, the president got angry and moved up Mattis's departure date, essentially shoving him out the door. That is what you get for loyal service to this president. So enjoy the ride. Another thing that happened today was also unusual, not something you hear every day. An American president doing really what no American president has done until now, endorsing the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and asking for a new Russian presence there.
Russia used to be the Soviet Union. Afghanistan made it Russia because they went bankrupt fighting in Afghanistan, Russia. So you take a look at other countries. Pakistan is there. They should be fighting. But Russia should be fighting. The reason Russia was in Afghanistan was because terrorists were going into Russia. They were right to be there. But why isn't Russia there? Why isn't India there? Why isn't Pakistan there? Why are we there and we're 6,000 miles away?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack. Keeping him honest, we were there and are there because of 9/11, because the Taliban gave safe haven to al-Qaeda. That's initially why the U.S. went. The U.S. has stayed there because of the continued concern the country could again become a breeding ground for extremists. And you can argue about whether the United States should still be there and the coalition still should be there and what impact that's been, what we've had, what impact it's had. But it's pretty clear why we went there. As for the claim the Soviet Union's adventure in Afghanistan was because of terrorism, that's not true. It was an effort to continue to grow the Soviet empire And it's unclear why an American president would welcome any new Russian intervention anywhere as the president did today. How's the ride so far? Is it enjoyable? Having gone? The president also wrote off the people of Syria today because he seemed to say that the country has nothing to offer in the way of loot.
So Syria was lost long ago. It was lost long ago. And besides that, we're talking about sand and death. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, vast wealth. We're talking about sand and death.
No vast wealth. In the past, as you know, the president has talked about taking the oil, as he says, from Iraq, as in plundering Iraq's oil. He also has a habit of equating longtime allies to shopkeepers paying for protection. He did it again today, while at the same time claiming that European leaders really, really like him.
I think my relationship, I will tell you, with the leaders of Europe is very good. A lot of them don't even understand how they got away with it for so many years. I'll say to Angela, and I'll say to many of the other leaders, I'm friends with all of them, I'll say, how did this ever happen? And they sort of go like, I can't believe it either. They can't believe it. You know why? Because they had presidents and other people within administrations in the past that allowed them to get away. Like some of them would say, well, no one ever asked us to pay.
Now, keep it honest, alliances such as NATO are not pay-for-protection schemes. This is not hiring a certain cement contractor with ties to the mob so that you don't get any union problems on your construction site. You can Google that one. Where there are allies, to be sure, there are legitimate disagreements over how much member nations spend on their own defense. NATO is not like a golf club. There are no dues. There are no green fees. The president, we should add, also said things today that are not untrue and not necessarily outlandish. He raised questions that other presidents might not, certainly. But even when he just did that, there was often something else, an iffy claim, an exaggeration, or a boast thrown in. Take a look.
We have an area that I brought up with our generals 4 or 5 weeks ago where Taliban is here, ISIS is here, and they're fighting each other. I said, why don't you let them fight? Why are we getting in the middle of it? I said, let them fight. They're both our enemies. Let them fight. Sir, we want to do it. They go in and they end up fighting both of them. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. I think I would have been a good general, but who knows?
Who knows? This is not a new claim. The president has often said he knows more than the generals, or our generals, as he said, or my generals. What's new is how many of his generals he has actually driven away or insulted. What's new is how the consequences of the things he says and does are beginning to be felt, whether it's the shortage of people to run crucial cabinet departments, or the sagging stock market, or hard times for farmers and manufacturers caught in a trade war that the president has said again and again are easy to win. And even now, he shows no sign of recognizing that what he says today can come back and bite him tomorrow. Enjoy the ride. So there's that, and there's the shutdown. We have breaking news on that as well. Today, the president invited lawmakers to the Situation Room, presumably to work out a deal to reopen the government. Maybe it was just a photo op. The president hopes to fund the wall he once said that Mexico would pay for. Tonight, CNN has new reporting on how the president may see a possible deal with Democrats who control the House starting tomorrow. CNN's Caitlin Collins joins us now with that. So what did and what didn't happen in this meeting in the Situation Room today?
Well, Anderson, where to start? This meeting already had an air of drama to it because it was held in the Situation Room, which White House officials was so they could communicate what a big crisis they believe is happening on the border. But they didn't need to hold it there to have some drama because there was already plenty in the room as soon as this meeting got started, when the Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen was supposed to be giving this briefing on what's happening at the border. But Nancy Pelosi interrupted her, said that the Democrats wanted to lay out their plan to reopen the government. That's when Chuck Schumer started with his plan, telling the president, proposing essentially that the president sign after they could pass these 6 bipartisan Senate bills, and then over the next 30 days or so, they could negotiate the DHS funding then. Now, that's an idea he pressed the president on several times, 3 times, in fact, according to what an aide in the room, or an aide familiar with the meeting, told us later on. And the president eventually responded, quote, "I would look foolish if I did that." Now, I talked to a White House official who was in that meeting as well and talked about what was going on. And they essentially said that when Chuck Schumer proposed that, they said, OK, well, if we do agree to that, the president does sign this bill and we move forward over the next 30 days to negotiate what we're going to do to keep DHS funded for the long haul. Will you come up off your hard line of only funding $1.3 billion for border security? Now, the Democrats did not signal that they would, so the White House essentially said, what would be the point in us agreeing for the president to sign these 6 bipartisan Senate bills if you're not going to move forward and come up any higher on that funding? So essentially, Anderson, what we're left at is at an impasse. There was a deadlock coming out of that meeting, and they did not come to any agreement during that meeting.
So do we know, how long is the White House prepared to let the shutdown go on for?
Well, things have changed. When the government first shut down partially, White House aides felt confident they could clear things up in a matter of days and they could message it properly. But they did fear at the time that if it went on, the longer it went on, the worse it would look for them. And now here we are in its 3rd week of this shutdown, 12 days now. And White House officials do not feel that there is an end in sight, especially after that meeting today, which they didn't expect a lot of progress and them to waltz out of there with some grand plan to reopen the government. But they say that things could be worse now between the White House and Democrats than they were when we started this 12 days ago.